I lived 48 years of marriage without knowing that my husband was writing down every time he told me no. 500 times, 500 dates, 500 denials locked in a safe I didn't even know existed. And when I discovered that notebook, my entire life collapsed and was reborn at the same time. My name is Beatrice, but everyone calls me Bea. I'm 75 years old, and this story I'm going to tell you happened not too long ago, back in 2015. It feels like it was yesterday. It also feels like it was a lifetime ago. Before I continue, I'd like to ask you something. Those of you listening to me right now, if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button down below, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters, because this story has so much more to tell. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing that people from all over the country are listening to me. It gives me strength to keep telling these stories I've kept inside my chest for so long. Now let me start from the very beginning. It was May 2015. I remember it well because it was freezing cold here at home, one of those autumn chills that seeps through the window frames and chills your bones. I was going through old papers in the house, looking for old documents because I needed to sort out some issues with my Social Security. You know how it is, right? All that Social Security stuff, paper here, paper there, proof of this, proof of that, endless bureaucracy. Gerald, my husband, had traveled 3 days earlier. And look, that was extremely rare indeed. In almost 50 years of marriage, I could count on one hand the times that man had slept away from home. He didn't like to travel, didn't like leaving his routine, didn't like leaving things without his control. But this time, there was no way around it. His brother Walter, who lived in rural Virginia, had gotten sick. Something serious. Walter had a heart problem, and his kids called desperately, asking Gerald to go there, because the two of them had been very close since childhood. So Gerald went, took the bus on a Monday morning, and said he'd stay there about 5-6 days. I remember he left the house complaining, grumbling that he didn't like leaving the house alone, that I should be careful with everything, not let anyone in, lock the doors well, the same things as always. When he left and the house fell silent, I felt something strange. It wasn't relief, it wasn't sadness, it was like a different kind of emptiness. You know when you take off tight shoes after a whole day, but you hadn't really noticed the shoes were squeezing you? It was kind of like that. So I started going through the cabinets, looking for those Social Security papers. I opened drawers, opened boxes, went through things. We accumulate so much stuff in life, my God. Electric bills from 1980, receipts for who knows what, old photographs, funeral prayer cards, yellowed letters, an entire life stored in shoeboxes and plastic bags. That's when I got to the bedroom closet, the big dark wood wardrobe we bought when we got married in 1967. That closet had his side and my side. His side had always been kind of mysterious. I never messed much with Gerald's things. Not because he had exactly forbidden it, but because, well, that's how things worked, each person in their own space. He didn't mess with my pots and pans. I didn't mess with his tools. He didn't mess with my nightstand. I didn't mess with his side of the closet. But that day I thought, well, I'm looking for house documents, our documents, as a couple. Maybe there's something stored there that I need. And he wasn't home for me to ask, so I opened it. His side of the closet was organized in a way that even scared me. Folded shirts, folded pants, everything separated by color. Stacked boxes with labels written in his handwriting, receipts, 1970, 1980. Walter documents, old photos. Everything very neat, very tidy. Gerald had always been like that, methodical, organized, controlled. I kept taking out boxes, looking, searching. That's when I pulled out a heavier box from the back, full of old magazines, and I saw it. Behind that box, kind of hidden in the corner, there was something metal, black, rectangular, a safe. My heart jumped. I stood there with that magazine box in my hand, looking at that thing. A safe hidden in the back of the closet, hidden from me. Why would my husband have a hidden safe? I put the box down on the floor and pulled out the safe. It was heavy, One of those old iron safes with a lock on the front and a space to put a key. I shook it. There was something inside. It wasn't money because it didn't make the sound of paper. It was something solid. I stood there, sitting on the bedroom floor, with that cold safe in my lap, not knowing what to do. Part of me said, "B, close that, put it back, wait for Gerald to come back and ask him." But another part, a part I didn't even know existed inside me, said, "No, you have the right to know what's in here. This is your house too. You're 75 years old. You've lived almost 50 years with this man, and he has a safe hidden from you." I tried to open it. I pulled. I forced. Nothing. Locked. I looked around, searching for a key. Nothing. I searched in his drawers, in the pockets of old pants. Nothing. The key wasn't there. I had that thing on my mind all day. I made food, washed dishes, swept the house, but my head was on that safe. What was inside? Why was it hidden? Why had he never told me? The next day, my grandson, Lucas, my daughter Teresa's son, came to visit me. Lucas is a smart kid. He's 22 years old, studying engineering. He always stops by to have coffee, eat some cake, give Grandma a hug. When he arrived, I had a troubled face. He noticed right away. "Grandma, what's with that face? Did something happen?" I took a deep breath and said, "Lucas, there's a safe in the bedroom. I found it hidden in your grandfather's closet. It's locked and I don't have the key. Can you open it?" He looked at me with that look of someone who didn't quite understand. "A safe, Grandma? Grandpa has a hidden safe?" "He does, and I want to know what's inside." Lucas is one of those kids who doesn't ask many questions. He saw that I was determined. He got his tools that he always carries in his backpack, some keys, some metal things I don't even know the names of, and went to the bedroom with me. He looked at the safe, turned it to one side, turned it to the other, took one of my hairpins, and started messing with the lock. He stayed there for about 15 minutes, sweating, concentrated. I was beside him, with my heart beating so hard I thought it was going to come out through my mouth, until I heard a click. "I got it, Grandma." Lucas opened the safe lid slowly. We looked inside. There was no money, no jewelry, no important documents. There was a notebook. An old notebook with a black leather cover, kind of worn, with a small padlock closing it. I picked up the notebook with trembling hands. It was heavy, thick, must have had about 200 pages. On the cover there was nothing written, just the black leather stained by time. "Is that all, Grandma?" Lucas asked, kind of disappointed. "Is that all?" He stayed a bit longer. We had coffee, talked about other things, but my head was on that notebook. When he left, I locked the door, went back to the bedroom, and sat on the bed with the notebook in my lap. The little padlock was tiny. I forced it with small scissors, and it opened easily. It was kind of rusty. I opened the notebook slowly. The first page had a date written in Gerald's handwriting, careful handwriting of someone who writes slowly, thinking about each letter. March 15th, 1967. And beside it in very large capital letters. No, just that. The date and the word no. I turned the page. April 22nd, 1967. No. I turned another. June 10th, 1967. No. I turned more and more and more and more. Page after page, date after date, all followed by the word no. Some pages had just one date, others had 2, 3, 4 dates. I went to the end of the notebook. The last page with writing had a date from 1985, November 23rd, 1985. No. I closed the notebook. My hands were freezing. My stomach was churning. I didn't understand anything. What was that? Why did my husband have a notebook full of dates and the word no? Why was it locked in a hidden safe? I got up from the bed and went to the living room. I got my old diary, the one I had started writing when I was young, after I got married. I didn't write every day, but I wrote down some important things. I took my diary and the black notebook to the kitchen table. I opened the black notebook on the first date, March 15th, 1967, 1967. We had gotten married in January of that year. I was 27 years old. I was pregnant with Teresa. I looked in my diary for something from that time. I found a note from March 1967. My mother isn't well. Sent word through Mrs. Anderson. She has a very bad cough. I asked Gerald to take me to her house tomorrow. He said no, that I'm pregnant and shouldn't be going around. I was sad, but he must be right. I felt a chill down my spine. That no in the notebook was the no he had given me when I asked to visit my sick mother. But why did he write that down? Why did he keep it? I went to the second date, April 22nd, 1967. I looked in my diary. There was a note. Cousin Louise is getting married next month and asked me to be her bridesmaid. I was so happy, but Gerald said we don't have money for new clothes and a gift. He said I have to decline. I wrote a letter to Louise, apologizing. She must have understood. Another no. I went to the third date, June 10th, 1967. Today I saw an ad in the newspaper for a used sewing machine, cheap. I thought I could buy it and do some sewing work to help with expenses. I told Gerald. He said it's not necessary, that he earns enough for the house. He said a pregnant woman needs to rest, not work. I think he's right. Another no. I started trembling. I started turning the pages of the black notebook faster. Date, no, date, no, date, no. There were hundreds. I started picking random dates and looking in my diary, in my memory. Some I remembered, others I didn't remember anymore. But when I thought carefully, a vague memory came. September 1968. I had asked to buy a new pair of shoes because mine had a hole. He said no, that I could get the old ones fixed. February 1970. I wanted to make a birthday cake for Teresa, who was going to turn 3 years old. I wanted to buy colored frosting and those things. He said we didn't need luxury. That simple cake was enough. May 1971. I wanted to accept Mrs. Anderson's invitation to go to the church party. He said no, that I had to stay home taking care of the children. August 1973. I wanted to plant some flowers in the backyard. He said no, that flowers were a waste of water. October 1975. I wanted to buy a small radio for the kitchen. He said it wasn't necessary. December 1978. I wanted to visit my sister who had just had a baby. He said no, that it was too far. January 1980. I wanted to take a sewing class at the church. He said no, that I already had too much work at home. Each date was a no. Each no was something I had asked for, that I had wanted, that I had dreamed of, and that he had denied. And he had written it down, had kept it, had locked it in a safe. Why? I spent the rest of that day and the whole night looking at that notebook. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly. I stayed there at the kitchen table with the black notebook open, reading date by date, trying to remember, trying to understand how many times I had asked for something and he had said no. How many times I had swallowed that no, thinking it was normal, that that's how it worked, that the husband was the one who decided. How many times I had given up on my little dreams, my small desires, because he had said no. And he had written it all down, as if it were a trophy, as if each no were his victory, as if he needed to have a record of all the control he had over me. I cried that night. I cried so much that my eyes were swollen. I cried from anger. I cried from sadness. I cried from shame. Shame of myself for having accepted all of that for so long without questioning. The next day, I woke up with the certainty that I needed to keep investigating, because there was something that wasn't making sense. I had looked at about 50, 60 dates in the notebook, but the notebook had much more than that. It had pages and pages, hundreds of dates. I didn't remember asking for that many things. I didn't have that many notes in my diary. There were dates I couldn't associate with any memory. What were those other no's? I sat down again with the notebook. I picked dates from the middle, from 1975 onwards when the children were older. March 1976. No, I didn't remember asking for anything that month. I looked in my diary. Nothing. What was that no? June 1977. No, nothing in my memory, nothing in the diary. November 1978. No. What had I asked for that November? That's when an idea came to me that made me even colder. What if those no's weren't for me? What if he was also writing down the no's he gave to the children? Or worse, what if he was writing down decisions he made alone? Things he simply decided we weren't going to have, weren't going to do, without us even asking? I needed to talk to someone, but I couldn't talk to Gerald. He was still in Virginia, would return in 2 days. And I didn't know how he'd react when he found out I had found the safe, that I had opened the notebook. I thought about calling Teresa, but she was working, had her own problems. Ben lived far away. Carmen was pregnant again. I didn't want to worry her. That's when I remembered Mrs. Anderson. Mrs. Anderson had been my neighbor for over 40 years. She had always been that person who knows things, who sees things, who notices what others don't notice. She was the only person I could trust at that moment. I waited until late afternoon when I knew she was home. I got the black notebook, wrapped it in a cloth bag, and went to her house. I knocked on the door. She opened with that smile of hers, but when she saw my face, the smile disappeared. "B, what happened? You look terrible, Anderson. I need to show you something. Can I come in?" She pulled me inside, sat me on the living room couch, made strong coffee, and sat beside me. I took the notebook out of the bag and placed it in her lap. I found this hidden in a safe in Gerald's closet. She opened the notebook, started reading the dates, the no's, turned a page, turned another, turned another. Her face started closing up. She went pale. When she got to about the middle of the notebook, she closed it, looked me in the eyes, and said, "B, do you know what this is? I know what I think it is, but I wanted to know if you think so too." She took a deep breath. "B, many years ago, I tried to tell you something. Do you remember?" I remembered. It must have been about 20 years ago. Mrs. Anderson had come to my house, had tried to bring up a subject about Gerald, about how he treated us. I had changed the subject, had gotten angry at her, had said she was interfering in my life. "I remember, I treated you badly. I'm sorry. It's not about apologies, B. It's about what I saw all these years, and you didn't want to see." Gerald always controlled everything in your life. Every step you took, every decision, every penny, every time you left the house. I saw it, I always saw it, but you didn't want to listen. Tears ran down my face. I didn't want to believe. I thought it was normal, that that's how it worked, that the man was the head of the house. Being the head of the house isn't this, B. This here, she tapped the notebook. This here is sickness. This here is obsession. This here is a man who turned control into ritual. He wrote down every time he denied you something, every time he exercised power over you. And he kept it, locked it away as if it were precious. We sat in silence for a while. I looked at that black notebook as if it were a poisonous snake. "What do I do, Anderson? He comes back the day after tomorrow." You confront him, B. After 50 years, you look him in the eyes and ask why. And you listen to the answer. And then you decide what to do with your life, because you still have life ahead of you, my friend. You're 75 years old, but you might have another 20, 30 years ahead. Are you going to spend those years the same way, or are you going to do it differently? I went home with the notebook under my arm and with Anderson's words echoing in my head. Over the next 2 days, I barely slept, barely ate. I kept waiting, counting the hours, looking at that notebook, and trying to gather the courage to do what needed to be done. On Thursday morning, Gerald called, saying he'd arrive in the late afternoon. He said his brother was better, that he could come home now. He asked if everything was okay. I said yes. My voice came out strange, but he didn't notice, or pretended not to notice. I cleaned the house, made food, put clean sheets on the bed, did everything as I always did, but this time it was different. I was different. I put the black notebook on the living room table, right in the middle, where he'd see it as soon as he walked in. When I heard the gate open, my heart raced. I heard his footsteps at the entrance, the key turning in the door opening. "B, I'm home." He walked in, put his suitcase on the floor and saw the notebook on the table. He stopped, stood there looking. His face changed. It became hard, serious, cold. He looked at me. "You went through my things?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an accusation. I took a deep breath, gathered all the courage I had and said, "Yes, I did. And I need you to explain to me what this is." He stood there, looking at the notebook on the table as if I had placed a bomb in the living room. His eyes went from the notebook to me, from me to the notebook. I saw his jaw lock. I saw his hands slowly close, forming fists at his sides. "Where did you find this?" His voice came out low, dangerous. It was that tone I knew very well, that tone he used when he was controlling his anger, when he was measuring each word before letting it out. "In your closet, behind the boxes, inside a safe I didn't even know existed." He took 2 steps toward the table, grabbed the notebook, held it with both hands, as if he were holding something sacred. He ran his hand over the leather cover, didn't open it. "You had no right to go through my things." I felt a heat rise from my chest to my face. It was anger, real anger, an anger I didn't know I had inside me. "I had no right, Gerald. I'm your wife of 48 years. This is my house too. These things are mine too. And you have a safe hidden from me with a notebook full of this." I pointed to the notebook in his hands. "Don't you think I have the right to know what this is?" He opened the notebook, ran his eyes over the first pages, closed it again. He looked at me with that face I knew so well, that face of someone who's right, who's in control, who won't apologize for anything. "It's just a record, a control I kept for a few years. A control of what, Gerald? Of every time you told me no? Of every time you denied something to me?" "It's not just that." Those 3 words chilled me more than anything. "It's not just that." What else was there? He sat in the chair, put the notebook in front of him, stayed silent for what seemed like an eternity. I stayed standing, leaning against the living room wall, waiting. My heart was beating so hard it hurt in my chest. When we got married, he started talking without looking at me, looking at the notebook. "I promised my father I would take care of you, that I would provide, that I would maintain order in the house. My father always said that a man who doesn't have control of his house isn't a man, that the family needs structure, discipline, someone who makes the right decisions." I pressed my hands together to stop trembling, so I started writing it down. At first, it was just for myself, to make sure I was maintaining the line, maintaining order. Every time you or the children asked for something that wasn't necessary, that was wasteful, that would take us off the right path, I would write down my decision so I wouldn't forget. So I wouldn't waver later, so I wouldn't waver. I repeated his words, feeling them in my mouth like poison. "You wrote down every time you said no to me, so you wouldn't waver, so you wouldn't change your mind, so you wouldn't let me have my own will." He raised his eyes to me, and for the first time in almost 50 years, I saw something different in those eyes. It wasn't remorse, it wasn't guilt, it was like surprise, as if he didn't understand why I was angry, as if I were speaking another language. "B, I always took care of you. You never went hungry. Nothing essential was ever lacking. You had a house, you had food, you had clothes, you had medicine when you needed it. The kids studied, grew up healthy. What more did you want? What more did I want?" That question hung in the air between us. I pulled the other chair and sat in front of him. I took the notebook from his hand. He didn't stop me. I opened to a page in the middle. A date from 1977. "What day was this, Gerald? Do you remember?" He looked at the date, frowned. "I don't remember all of them. It was many years." "Then let me help you remember." I got my old diary that was on the sideboard. I had brought it to the living room before he arrived. I looked for the date. August 12th, 1977. It's here in my diary. Today, Teresa came home excited. She said the teacher said she has talent for drawing, that she should take art classes. There's a private teacher who gives lessons at her house 3 times a week. I talked to Gerald. He said no, that drawing isn't useful for anything, doesn't lead to a future, doesn't make money, that Teresa needs to focus on serious studies. The girl cried in her room all night. I went there, hugged her, said that her father was right, that she'd understand when she grew up. Teresa was 10 years old, Gerald. 10 years old. And you wrote down that no here in your notebook. He didn't say anything, just kept looking at the notebook. I turned a few more pages. Another date, 1979. This one here, March 79th. Do you remember? Silence. Let me refresh your memory. Ben had just turned 11 years old. The school soccer team was going to make a trip to another city to play a championship. He dreamed of that, talked about it every day. He needed $20 for registration and the bus. I saved money from my sewing work, money I made in secret because you didn't like me sewing for others. When I told you, you took the money from my hand and said no, that soccer was a waste of time, that boys had to study, not play around with balls. Ben didn't go on the trip. All his friends went. He stayed, cried so much he got sick. He got a fever. You wrote down that no here. Gerald shifted in his chair, interlaced his fingers on the table. I did what I thought was best. Soccer wasn't going to give the boy a future, and it didn't. He's there today, graduated, engineer, earning well. If I had let him waste time with soccer, waste time, I cut him off. Being a child was wasting time. Having dreams was wasting time. Wanting something was wasting time. I kept turning pages. I stopped on another date, 1981. This one I remember very well, Gerald. I don't even need to look in the diary. Carmen turned 15 in September 81. All her school friends had parties. Pretty dress, big cake, music, those things girls dream about. Carmen never asked for much, never complained about anything. But she asked me for that party. She asked me with shining eyes. She said it could be simple, in our house even, just the closest friends, without luxury. I told you, you said no. You said a 15th birthday party was frivolity, an unnecessary expense that we didn't have money to throw away on nonsense. Carmen spent her birthday crying in her room. Her friends had parties. She didn't. And you wrote down that no here in your notebook like a trophy. He slapped his hand on the table. It wasn't hard, but it was enough to make me jump. I didn't write it down as a trophy. I wrote it down to maintain control, to not lose my head, to not start spending money we didn't have, to not let this family turn into chaos. Don't you understand? Someone had to be firm, someone had to hold things together. If I let you, you would want everything. You'd want clothes, you'd want parties, you'd want trips, you'd want luxury, and we'd end up in misery. We never wanted luxury. I raised my voice too for the first time in decades. We wanted life, Gerald. We wanted to live. We wanted to feel that we existed, that we had value, that we could dream about something. He got up from the chair, walked to the window, stood looking at the street with his hands in his pockets. I stayed sitting, holding that notebook, feeling its weight in my fingers. After a while, he spoke, still with his back to me. I did what my father taught, what his father taught, what every man in my family always did. Take care, provide, decide. You think it was easy for me? You think I didn't want to give you things? But someone had to think about the future. Someone had to be responsible. Being responsible isn't this. My voice came out tired now, sad. Being responsible isn't writing down every no in a notebook and locking it in a safe. Being responsible isn't treating your family like they're irresponsible children who need to be controlled all the time. Being responsible was talking to me. It was us deciding together. It was you asking me what I thought. It was you considering that I also had a head to think. He turned to me. I respected you all these years. Respecting isn't this, Gerald. We were silent again. A heavy silence, full of 48 years of things unsaid, desires swallowed, dreams stored at the bottom of dusty drawers. I looked at the notebook again. It had more than 200 pages. I had looked at about 50, 60. There was still much more. Many things I didn't remember. Many things I had buried in memory because it was easier to forget than to feel the pain again. There are many dates here I don't remember, Gerald. Many. What are these other no's? He came back to the chair, sat down, took the notebook, opened to a page, kept looking. Some were decisions I made alone, things I saw that you would want, and I decided before you even asked that it wasn't going to happen to not create hope. I felt my stomach turn. You decided that we weren't going to have something before we even asked, to spare us disappointment, to spare or to control? He didn't answer. I took the notebook back, started reading dates out loud, randomly. Some I vaguely remembered when I spoke them out loud. Others I didn't. April 70th. Do you remember this one? He shook his head. No, I didn't remember either. But when I saw that date, a memory came. We passed in front of a store, and there was a blue dress in the window. I looked at the dress, just looked, didn't ask, didn't say anything. But you saw that I looked. The next day, you wrote down that date in the notebook. You wrote down a no for something I didn't even ask for. He looked away. July 70th. This one silence. Mrs. Anderson invited me to go with her into town to shop, just go together on the bus, spend the afternoon. I told you in the morning, before you left for work. You said you'd think about it. When you came back at night, you said no, that I had clothes to wash, food to make, that I couldn't be going around. I didn't even argue, just lowered my head and said, okay. And you wrote down that no here? I kept reading dates. My voice was failing now. Tears were starting to fall. January 74th, our friend Joe's mother died. I wanted to go to the wake. You said no, that wakes weren't places for women, that I'd be too upset. I stayed home. Written down. September 75th. I found an ad in the newspaper for an adult literacy course at the church, free at night, twice a week. I never studied properly, Gerald. I was always ashamed of signing my name crookedly, of not being able to read well. When I showed you the ad, you said I didn't need it, that I already knew enough, that a housewife doesn't need education. I tore up the ad, written down. December 77th. The children wanted to put up a Christmas tree, wanted to decorate the house. It was just some cheap decorations, some lights. They were so excited. You said no, that Christmas didn't need luxury, that a simple dinner was enough. The children got sad. Written down. May 78th, I got some money from my sister on my birthday. $20. I wanted to use it to buy lipstick. Lipstick, Gerald. It had been years since I had bought anything for myself. You said lipstick was vanity, that I didn't need it, that it was better to save the money for some emergency. I saved it. Written down. My voice broke completely. Tears were falling on the notebook, staining the old pages. How many no's, Gerald? How many? 500. 500 times you decided that I couldn't, that the children couldn't, that we didn't deserve, that we didn't need. 500 times you exercised power over us and thought it was important enough to write down, to keep, to lock in a safe. He had his hands on his face now. I don't know if he was ashamed or if he was angry or if he was feeling something. I couldn't read him anymore. Or maybe I never really could. There's one more thing I need to know, I said, wiping tears with the back of my hand. These no's here from the end of 83, 84, 85, when the children were older, when they were starting to make decisions on their own. What are these? He took his hands off his face, looked at me. Teresa wanted to study architecture in college. She passed the entrance exam. Do you remember? I remembered. Of course I remembered. It was in 1983. Teresa had finished high school, had studied so much, passed the entrance exam on the first try, architecture. She wanted to build beautiful houses, make projects, design. It was her dream since she was little. She needed your authorization, Gerald spoke, to register. She was still a minor. She asked me, I said no. I said she had to work, help at home, not keep studying more years. That architecture was a course for rich people, not for people like us. She cried, begged. You begged too. I maintained my decision and wrote it down. I put my hand over my mouth to hold back the sob. Teresa, my daughter, her dream destroyed. And I had let it happen. I had begged, had cried with her. But in the end, I had accepted his decision. Had told her to accept, too. Had said that her father knew what was best. Ben wanted to marry Anna Paula. Do you remember her? I remembered the beautiful girl from a good family who had dated Benny since high school. They were in love, wanted to get married in '84. He was 22 years old, she was 20. They had jobs, were responsible, but he came to ask me for my blessing. I said no. I said he was too young, that she wasn't good for him, that he had to wait. They broke up. She married someone else. He suffered for 2 years, and I wrote it down. I couldn't hold back the crying anymore. Carmen wanted to be a teacher, wanted to do teacher training. It was 1985. She was 18 years old. She got a scholarship at a private school, came to show me all happy. I said no. I said she had to get a real job that would earn money right away, that teachers earned poorly. She gave up the scholarship, went to work in a factory, hated that job, and I wrote it down. He said all this with a monotone voice, as if he were reading a shopping list, as if they weren't lives he had decided, dreams he had killed, futures he had changed with one word. No. I closed the notebook, put it on the table, looked at that man in front of me, that man I had called husband for 48 years, that man I had obeyed, respected, followed, that man I thought loved me. Why did you keep this notebook, Gerald? Why didn't you throw it away after you stopped writing? Why did you lock it in a safe? He was silent for a while, then spoke softly. Because I wanted to remember, wanted to make sure I had done the right thing, that I had been strong, that I hadn't weakened. Weakening would have been truly loving us, would have been seeing us as people, would have been letting us live. I got up from the chair. My whole body was aching. My chest hurt. My head hurt. My soul hurt. I don't know what to do with all this I've discovered. I don't know how I look at you now, knowing this. I don't know how I continue. He got up too, took a step toward me. B, we can get over this. We can forget. We can continue as before. As before. Those 2 words were the worst he could have said. I don't want to continue as before, Gerald. I can't stand living as before anymore. I took the notebook, took it with me to the bedroom, locked the door, sat on the bed with that black notebook in my lap and cried until I had no more tears. I cried for the 48 years I had lost, for the dreams I had buried, for the times I had said yes when I wanted to say no, for the times I had lowered my head when I wanted to raise my voice, for the times I had accepted crumbs when I deserved the world. I cried for Teresa, who didn't become an architect, for Ben, who didn't marry his love, for Carmen, who didn't become a teacher. I cried for all the no's that were in that notebook, and for the no's he probably didn't even write down, the silent no's, the implicit no's, the no's that were in the air in the way he looked, in the way he sighed when we started to say something. When night came, he knocked on the bedroom door. B, come eat something. Come to bed. I'm going to sleep in Carmen's room today. B, please, Gerald, I need time. He stayed on the other side of the door for a few minutes. Then I heard his footsteps walking away. I spent that night in my youngest daughter's room, the room she had left when she got married, lying in her narrow bed, looking at the ceiling, holding that notebook against my chest. And for the first time in 75 years of life, I began to ask myself who I was, who I could have been, who I still could be, because that notebook wasn't just a record of his no's, it was a record of all the yeses I had never said to myself. And now, holding it there in the dark, I felt something being born inside me, something that had been asleep for decades, something that was like anger, but was bigger than that. It was like a hunger, a desire, a decision. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew I wasn't going to swallow no anymore, and that this notebook, as much as it hurt to look at it, had given me a gift unintentionally. It had shown me the truth, and the truth, as much as it hurts, sets you free. I spent 3 nights in Carmen's room. 3 nights where I barely closed my eyes, just staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house, his footsteps in the living room, the television on until late, the bathroom flush, sounds I had heard all my life, but that now seemed different, strange, as if I were living with a stranger. During the day, we'd run into each other in the kitchen. I'd make coffee, he'd drink it silently, I'd heat up food, he'd eat without looking at me. The house was in heavy silence, the kind that holds your breath. It was as if we were walking on broken glass, afraid of making noise, afraid of saying the wrong thing that would make everything explode once and for all. But I knew that silence wouldn't last, that at some point we'd have to talk again, that at some point I'd have to decide what to do with all of that. It was on the 3rd day that Teresa appeared. She had called the day before, asking if everything was okay, if Dad had come back well from the trip. I had said yes, that everything was normal, but my voice must have come out strange, because she said she'd stop by for coffee. When she arrived, Gerald had gone out to sort out some things at the bank. She came in, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and immediately noticed something was wrong. Mother knows daughter, but daughter also knows mother. Mom, what happened? You look terrible. You're not sleeping well. I had 2 options. I could lie, say everything was fine, sweep it under the rug, as I had done all my life, or I could tell the truth, could share that weight with someone. I looked at my daughter, 45 years old, beautiful, intelligent, hardworking, but I saw something in her that broke my heart. I saw an old sadness in her eyes, a hurt she had carried since she was young. I always knew it had to do with the college story, with the dream of being an architect that her father had destroyed, but we had never talked about it openly. It had become one of those forbidden subjects in the family, one of those wounds we don't touch for fear of bleeding again. Teresa, sit here. I need to show you something. The way I spoke must have scared her, because she sat down quickly with wide eyes. I went to get the notebook in the bedroom. I came back with it in my hand, put it on the table in front of her. What is this, Mom? It's a notebook that your father kept for 18 years, from 1967 to 1985. I found it hidden in a safe in his closet. Open it. She opened slowly, started reading the first pages. I saw her face change, her forehead furrow, her lips tighten. She turned a page, turned another, turned another. Mom, what is this? They're dates with the word no. These are all the times your father told me no, told you kids no, decided we weren't going to have something, weren't going to do something. He wrote down each one, 500 times. The color drained from her face. 500. Look at the end. 1983. There should be a date in October. She leafed to the end of the notebook. She looked, found it, looked at me with eyes full of tears. It's the day he denied me college. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. She had understood. He told me yesterday. He told me about you, about your brother, about your sister. Each no that's there. He thought he was right, that he was taking care of the family, that he was maintaining order. He wrote it down as if it were a good thing, as if each no were his victory. Teresa closed the notebook, pushed it away, as if it burned. She got up from the chair, started walking around the kitchen with her hands on her head. I saw that she was shaking. Mom, I spent 32 years thinking it was my fault, thinking I hadn't insisted enough, that I hadn't fought for my dream, that I had given up too easily. I blamed myself all these years for not doing architecture, and now I find out that he wrote that down, that he kept it, that he locked it in a safe. She sat down again, covered her face with her hands, started crying. A crying that came from very deep, from very far. A crying of 3 decades of stored pain. I got up and hugged my daughter. I held her tight while she cried, and I cried with her. We stayed like that for a time, I can't say how long. I just know it was necessary. When she calmed down a bit, she wiped her face with her hand and looked at me. "What are you going to do, Mom?" "I don't know yet, but I know I can't continue as if nothing happened. I can't pretend everything's okay, because it's not and never was. I just didn't want to see." "Have you thought about separating?" The word separation hung in the air, heavy, scary, but also kind of liberating. "Teresa, I'm 75 years old. I got married at 27. I spent 48 years with this man. My whole life was beside him. I don't know what it's like to live alone. I don't know how to pay bills, solve bank problems, those things. It was always him who did all of that. But you know how to cook. You know how to take care of a house. You know how to sew. You know how to do a lot of things. And I'm here, Mom. Ben is here. Carmen is here. We're not going to leave you alone. We're going to help." She held my hand on the table. "Mom, you deserve to be happy, even if it's just for the last years of your life. You deserve to live the way you want. Eat what you want, go where you want, do what you want. You spent your whole life asking for permission. It's time to stop." Her words entered my chest and stayed echoing. It's time to stop. We talked a bit more. She talked about her siblings, said she'd talk to them, that they needed to know. She said she'd schedule a day for us to get together, all together to talk about it. I agreed. When she left, I was alone in the kitchen with that black notebook in front of me. I looked at it. I thought about everything that had happened in the last few days. I thought about my life. I thought about who I was and who I could have been. That's when I heard the key in the door. Gerald arriving. He came in, put his things on the sideboard, came to the kitchen. He stopped when he saw me sitting there with the notebook in front. "You still have that?" "I do, and I'm going to keep it until I decide what to do." He sighed in that way of his, that tired way he always did when he thought I was being stubborn, difficult, complicated. "B, how long are you going to keep this nonsense in your head? I already explained, already said it was just a control I kept, that I did thinking about the family's good. Why don't you forget this and we go back to normal?" Back to normal. Normal. That word gave me an anger I had never felt. Normal for you, Gerald. For me, it was never normal. I just didn't know it wasn't. He pulled the chair and sat in front of me. He put his arms crossed on the table. That posture I knew so well. That posture of someone who's going to have a serious conversation, of someone who's going to explain things for the stupid person to understand. "So tell me, Bae, what do you want? Want me to apologize?" "Okay, I apologize. Sorry. There, now stop this and let's live our life. You think it's just that? That it's just apologizing, and that's it, Gerald. You controlled my whole life. You decided everything for me. You treated me like I was a child, like I didn't have the capacity to think, to decide, to want. And you wrote it all down as if it were something to be proud of. I'm proud of having kept this family standing, of having provided, of having given roof, food, clothes. You never lacked anything. We did lack something, yes. We lacked affection, freedom, being heard, being respected, being seen as people." He slapped his hand on the table harder this time. "I always respected you. Always. I never hit you, never cursed you, never cheated on you. I was a good husband. A good husband isn't just that, Gerald. A good husband is someone who sees his wife as equal, as a partner, not as property. You treated me like I was yours. Yours to order, yours to control, yours to decide." He got up from the chair, started walking around the kitchen. I saw he was nervous. I saw it in his closed hands, in his heavy breathing, in the way he walked from one side to the other. "I'm not going to discuss this with you anymore. It's decided. I'm going to throw this notebook away, and we don't talk about it anymore." He extended his hand to grab the notebook. I held it first. "No, you're not going to throw it away. This notebook stays with me. B, give me that notebook." "No." We stood there, both standing, me holding the notebook against my chest, him with his hand extended, looking at each other. And in that moment, I saw something in his eyes that chilled me. I saw anger. I saw contempt. I saw that look he gave when someone contradicted him, when someone questioned his authority. And for the first time in 48 years, I didn't lower my gaze, didn't back down, didn't give in. I showed this notebook to Teresa today. She saw what you did to her dream. I'm going to show it to Ben and Carmen too. They have the right to know. His face turned red. You don't have that right. You're not going to turn my children against me. I'm not going to turn anyone against anyone. I'm just going to show the truth. You did this, Gerald. You wrote it down. You kept it. You put this truth in a notebook and locked it in a safe. Now this truth is going to come out and you're going to have to deal with it. He took 2 steps back, looked at me in a way I had never seen, as if he didn't know me, as if I had turned into another person in front of him. You've changed, he said. I don't know what got into you, but you've changed. You're not the bee I married anymore. And it was at that moment, hearing those words, that I felt something inside me click into place, something that had been crooked all my life and finally straightened. You're right. I changed, or rather, I woke up. I spent 75 years asleep, and now I woke up. And you know what I saw when I woke up? That I wasted my whole life, trying to be what you wanted, trying to please you, trying not to contradict you, trying to be small enough to fit inside your nose. My voice was firm now. It wasn't trembling anymore, wasn't afraid anymore. But I don't want to be small anymore. I don't want to fit inside your nose anymore. I want to live, Gerald. I want to live the time I have left, the way I want to live. And what does that mean? I took a deep breath, gathered all the courage I had. It means I want you to leave the house. The silence that fell in the kitchen was absolute. I heard my heart beating. I heard the tick-tock of the clock on the wall. I heard cars passing on the street outside. What? He said quietly, as if he wasn't sure he had heard right. I want you to leave the house, to pack your things and go. You can stay at Ben's house for a few days while we sort this out properly. But I don't want to live with you anymore. You're crazy? You've completely lost your mind. No, Gerald. For the first time in my life, I'm sane. For the first time, I'm thinking clearly, and I know what I want, and I don't want this anymore. He laughed, a joyless, bitter laugh. You think you're going to be able to live alone at 75 years old? You don't know how to do anything. You don't know how to pay bills. You don't know how to solve problems. You don't know anything. You need me. Then I'll learn. I'll learn to do everything I don't know. I'll learn to live. It's never too late to learn. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. No, Gerald. The biggest mistake of my life was not doing this 40 years ago. He stood looking at me for a while. I saw several things pass across his face. Anger, disbelief, confusion, fear, maybe. But I didn't see remorse, didn't see guilt, didn't see him truly understand what he had done. Okay, he finally said. If that's what you want, fine. I'll leave. I'll go to Ben's house. But when you face reality, when you realize you can't live alone, I don't know if I'll be willing to come back. I accept that risk. He left the kitchen. I heard him go upstairs, enter the bedroom. I heard drawers opening and closing. I heard him throwing things into a suitcase. I stayed sitting there in the kitchen with the notebook in my hand, shaking all over inside, but firm on the outside. About 20 minutes later, he came down with a suitcase in his hand, passed through the kitchen, stopped at the door, looked at me. Last chance, B? Are you sure? I am. He shook his head, left. I heard the gate open and close. I heard his car start. I heard the sound of the engine moving away, and then the house was silent. A silence different from all the silences I had ever heard. A silence that was mine. I sat there in the kitchen until it got dark. I didn't get up to turn on the light. I stayed in the dark, feeling the empty house, feeling the weight of what I had just done. Had I done the right thing? Wasn't I being a foolish old woman, dramatic, exaggerated? Shouldn't I have swallowed it, forgotten, continued as it was? After all, there were many people who lived like that. There were many women my age who had gone through the same thing and had stayed married until the end. Why couldn't I do the same? But then I looked at the black notebook on the table. Even in the dark, I could see its shape, and I knew the answer, because I couldn't anymore. Simple as that. I no longer had inside me the capacity to pretend, to swallow, to accept. Something had broken when I opened that notebook. Something that held everything in place had broken, and now there was no way to fix it. And you know what? I didn't want to fix it. The phone rang. It was Teresa. "Mom, Dad just arrived at Ben's house. He's saying you kicked him out of the house. Is it true?" "It is." "Wow, Mom. I didn't think you'd do it so fast, but I'm here. Ben is too. We're going there tomorrow to talk to you." "Is everything okay? Do you want me to come sleep there today?" "You don't need to, my daughter. I'm fine, I promise." I hung up the phone, got up, turned on the house lights, went to the kitchen, and heated up lunch food. I put a plate on the table, ate slowly, alone, in my kitchen, in my house. Then I washed the dishes, dried them, put them away, swept the floor, tidied things up, locked the doors, turned off the lights, went upstairs to the bedroom I had shared with him for 48 years. I looked at the bed, at his empty side, at his closed closet, at his things that were still there. I changed the sheets, put new sheets, fresh smelling. I opened the window to let in fresh air. I took my pillow and put it right in the middle of the bed. Not on my side, in the middle. I lay down, looked at the ceiling, felt the silence of the house. A silence that no longer had the sound of his breathing beside me, that no longer had the sound of him turning over, that no longer had the sound of him snoring softly. And for the first time in decades, I felt something like peace. It wasn't happiness yet. It wasn't joy. It was a tired, painful, but true peace. It was the peace of someone who finally stopped running, who finally looked at the truth head on and decided to do something about it. I closed my eyes and slept all night without waking up once. When the sun came through the window in the morning, I woke up slowly. I stayed there for a while, lying down, looking at the light hitting the wall, listening to the birds outside, smelling the fresh air coming through the window. I got up, went to the bathroom, looked in the mirror. There was an old woman looking back at me. White hair, face full of wrinkles, tired eyes. But there was something different in that face. Something in the eyes, a light I hadn't seen for a long time. It was me. Finally, it was just me. I wasn't B, Gerald's wife. I wasn't B who obeyed. I wasn't B who lowered her head. I was Beatrice, the woman I had been before getting married and who I had forgotten existed. And she was waking up. On Saturday morning, 2 days after Gerald had left the house, my 3 children came to visit me. Teresa had called her siblings, had told them about the notebook, had said they needed to come, that it was urgent, that it was about their father, about the family, about things they needed to know. I had spent those 2 days alone in the house, waking up late, having coffee slowly, doing things my way, in my time. There was no one complaining that the coffee was weak. There was no one grumbling that the food was unsalted. There was no one telling me to hurry this or that. It was strange, it was scary, but it was also good in a way I couldn't explain. When I heard the gate open and saw the 3 arriving together, my heart tightened. It had been a while since I'd seen my children all together like that. Usually we'd meet on birthdays, at Christmas, on those special dates. But there, on that ordinary Saturday, all 3 came. Teresa with that worried face of hers, Ben serious, quiet, the way he'd always been. Carmen with red eyes, as if she had already cried on the way. I opened the door. They came in one by one, giving me a kiss, hugging me. I smelled each one, Teresa's perfume, Ben's soap, Carmen's lotion. Smells I'd known since they were little. Smells of children, of family, of home. We sat in the living room. I had made coffee, had put cake on the table, those things mothers do even when their hearts are heavy. They got coffee, but no one ate anything. They sat there, all three looking at me, waiting for me to start. It was Ben who spoke first. He had always been the most direct of the three. "Mom, Teresa told us about a notebook, about things Dad wrote down. We came here because we need to understand what's happening. Dad is staying at my house. He's devastated. He said you kicked him out, that you're different, that he doesn't know what got into you." I took a deep breath. "I know it must be hard for you to see your father and mother separated after so long. But I need you to understand that this wasn't a decision I made in the heat of the moment. This was a decision that took me 48 years to make." I got up, went to get the notebook that was on the sideboard. I came back and put it on the coffee table in front of the three of them. "This is what I found hidden in a safe in your father's closet. I didn't even know this safe existed. It was locked. I opened it and found this." They looked at the notebook as if it were something dangerous. "What is it?" Carmen asked in a thin voice. "Open it and see." Teresa picked up the notebook. She already knew, had already seen, but opened it again, slowly, and showed her siblings the first pages, the dates, the no's. "I don't understand." Ben frowned. "They're just dates with the word no written. It's not just that. Each of these dates is a time your father denied me something, or denied you, or decided alone that we weren't going to have, weren't going to do. It's 18 years of written down no's. 500 no's that he thought were important enough to record, to keep, to lock in a safe." The silence that fell in the living room was so heavy I felt it pressing on my chest. "Teresa has already seen her part." I continued. "The date when he denied her college. Now you two need to see yours." Ben picked up the notebook, started leafing slowly at first, then faster. I saw his face changing with each page he turned. I saw his forehead furrowing more, his mouth tightening, his eyes getting moist. "There are many dates here from the 70s, he said. "I don't remember all of these. I don't remember asking for so many things. You didn't ask for many of these things," he decided alone. "He decided you weren't going to have them before you even asked. And some you asked for, but you were too young to remember now." He stopped on a page, kept looking at it for a long time. 1979, March. He read out loud. "I remember that month. I remember it very well." His voice failed. "It was the soccer team trip. You wanted to go. All your friends were going. You dreamed of that." "I saved money," he said, still looking at the page. "I collected cans. I helped Mr. Johnson from the corner wash his car. I did odd jobs at the market carrying bags. I saved $15. I only needed 5 more. Mom had saved $5 from her sewing. Mom gave it to me. I went to show Dad, all happy, saying I had managed to save the money." He stopped, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He took the money from my hand, the $20, said he'd keep it, that it would be used for something better, that soccer wasn't a future, that I had to thank him for teaching me to have priorities. I was 11 years old, Mom. 11 years old. And he took the money I had saved with so much effort and wrote down that no in his notebook as if it were something to celebrate. Carmen started crying softly. Teresa put her hand on her brother's shoulder. "I didn't go on the trip," he continued. "I stayed home. All my friends went. They came back telling about the things they saw, the games they played, the food they ate. I pretended I didn't care, but I did. I cared so much I cried hidden under the blanket every night that week. And Mom hugged me and said Dad was right, that I'd understand when I grew up." He looked at me. There was no anger in that look. There was pain, a lot of pain. "Did you say that because you believed it, Mom, or because you had no choice?" I swallowed hard. That question hurt more than anything. I said it because I thought I had to say it, because that's